if you work as a business person, whatever is for sale in your store, all the goods or the merchandise or the commodities that are for sale, whether display items or for sale items or inventory, it does not make any difference whatsoever. Anything in your store that is for sale is subject to zakah. Anything that is in your store, okay, or you utilize to run your business, but it's not for sale, it is zakah exempt. All the devices or the utilities or the tools, the furniture, the surveillance cameras, the trucks, the machines, that whatever you utilize to run your business are zakah exempt. So just make sure that you take into consideration the commodities, the merchandise, the goods that are for sale. You might have stocks in the market, for example. If those stocks are a part of your 401k, it has a different way of calculating it because of a very simple fact that your 401k is not fully accessible. And as you know all, one of the conditions for the zakatability of the wealth is that it has to be fully accessed or accessible. So since you have a very limited access to your 401k or for your 529, for example, for the education of your kids if you have that account, or for your pension plan if you work for the government, then you go with a very simple formula. You go with the withdrawable amount or the accessible amount. Okay, if you apply for a humanitarian case or hardship case, okay, in the zakat due date, it's just like a very theoretical calculation. If you try your best to withdraw as much as you can from your 401k, how much you will be having an access to? Say, for example, 50%. If your account has, in the zakat due date in the beginning of Ramadan, has $100,000 and you have an access to 50% of that account, then the accessible amount is $50,000. However, if you decide to proceed, you will not be given the $50,000 in full. You will be charged, right? You will be penalized, sometimes penalty, interest, processing fees, administration fees, whatever they call it. Say that the total withdrawal that will be taken from your account is 5,000, then the zakatable one is 45,000. It's 45,000. And you need to do this very theoretical calculation on an annual basis because your 401k, whatever retirement account you might have, is subject to zakah. But again, it's not subject to zakah in full. It is not like the cash money that you have because of a very limited access you have to it. When it comes to jewelry, you don't have to pay zakah in jewelry. You don't have to, as long as the jewelry that your wife or your daughters have are within the average that other sisters in that society have in general, and they are for their personal use. There is no commercial purpose behind having the jewelry. Commercial purpose could mean saving the value of money. You buy jewelry just to save the value of dollars because of the, or to set off the inflation, because jewelry has intrinsic value, as you know. So the purpose behind buying jewelry is to save the value of dollars. That's a commercial purpose. Or otherwise, if the average, for example, is 15 or 20,000 per sister, okay, and someone has 40,000, and the first 20,000 are zakah exempt because this is the average that other ladies at that society have, while the surplus or the extra is subject to zakah. So you create something that's called the virtual pool of money. Virtual pool of money. If you have, if you work as an employee, as a professional, you receive like bi-weekly or monthly paycheck. Do not worry about the flow of cash that you have throughout the whole year. Just receive your money, spend whatever you want to spend, and save whatever you want to save. In the zakat due date, whatever is left over, whatever is still saving from the paycheck or paychecks that you receive is subject to zakah. Is subject to zakah. What if you work as a professional, for example, and you provide, like you work for your own, okay? You provide a professional service. You work as an engineer or consultant or CPA or attorney or medical doctor, whatever the profession might be, and you receive money sometimes on a daily basis. Every single day you have clients. Every single client makes a payment. Now, how to calculate the zakah on the flow of cash or on the cash flow that you receive sometimes on a daily basis. Some people actually here get confused. They think that حولان الحول, the passage of one lunar year, which is obviously one of the conditions for the zakatability of the wealth, means that every single payment has to stay under your possession for one complete year. And that is wrong. If you want to go with this approach, you're going to end up with having 360 plus zakat due date. So how to handle the cash flow that you receive sometimes on daily basis? You need to make sure that you have a nisab. Nisab means threshold, means the minimum amount of money or the minimum volume of wealth that if you have it, then you will be counted basically as a zakat payer. If you do not have it, then you don't need to worry about zakat al maal. Nowadays, the approximate, and not the exact, the approximate value of an nisab that if you have it in the beginning of Ramadan, then you need to pay zakat al maal is roughly $4,250. Where did we get it from? The nisab itself is 85 grams of gold. 85 grams of gold. And as you know, the value of gold actually fluctuates up and down. So in the zakat due date, which is the beginning of Ramadan, you need to do some homework. Pick up the phone or just check or Google, how much the gold, the gram of gold, or obviously the 24 karat and not any other kind of gold. Say for example, just to make it simple, $50. $50 times 85 grams of gold, that is $4,250. What does it mean? It means that if you have $4,250, then you are counted, you are labeled as a zakat payer. So you need to consider paying zakat al maal for that year. It doesn't mean that you have to pay zakat, because in some cases, even if you can accumulate or constitute the nisab, remember $4,250, you might be owing other people money. You might be in debt. There might be some utility bills. You need to put aside some few thousands of dollars for the monthly expenses for yourself, for your family, for your transportation, for your food, for your health care, for any other personal expenses. So for that particular month, before you determine whether or not you have to pay zakat al maal, you can deduct everything that is due. That is due only. So for example, if you owe the mortgage company $100,000 for the next 10 years, you cannot deduct the $100,000 from now, because they are not due immediately. You are in installment, you are in payment plan. So you deduct only and only whatever is due for that particular month. You have some utility bills like water, electricity, or cell phone, whatever the utility might be. You deduct everything. Now, if the net, after deducting all the deductions, after deducting everything, is still nisab, threshold, $4,250, then you pay your zakat based on 2.5% zakat rate. If the total amount or the net amount after deducting everything went beyond the nisab, then it is not zakat. You can pay your zakat if you wish, but the question here, do you have to pay zakat or not? The answer is you do not have to pay your zakat. This is just a very, very brief introduction on how to calculate zakat al maal. Another thing that we need to consider, is it accurate to consider the beginning of Ramadan as your hawl or as your zakat due date? The answer is no. If you want to be very technical, very accurate in your calculation, your hawl or the fiscal lunar year starts from the moment in which you accumulate or constitute the nisab. So if you work for a company and your monthly payment or monthly salary is $4,250, for example, then by the time you receive the first check, this is the beginning of your hawl. This is the beginning of your hawl. However, practically speaking, it's really hard if it is not even close to impossible to remember exactly what was the date in which you accumulated that amount under your possession. So as they say, just take it easy and consider the beginning of Ramadan as your hawl. Inna Allah Ghafur Rahim. Once the zakah is due, then there is no excuse for a Muslim to delay his or her payment. If you have the zakah money available and you have the eligible zakah recipients available, then there is no excuse. To the extent that some scholars mentioned that if the zakah money, out of laziness or carelessness or procrastination or whatever the reason might be, was not paid on time, and the money was stolen or destroyed or have been taken in a way or another, then you have to pay your zakah one more time. You have to pay your zakah one more time. You are not waived, you are not excused, because the delay actually was unjustifiable one. So once your zakah is due, then you have to make sure that you pay your zakah immediately. Different kinds of assets are not subject to zakah. There are some zakatable wealth and some non-zakatable wealth. Let me start with the non-zakatable wealth. Anything that is labeled or counted as personal belonging, personal items, something that you utilize for yourself, there is no commercial purpose behind owning it, is zakah exempt. Your transportation, for example, the house that you live in is a zakah exempt. Even if you have more than one house, even if you have a house here in the US, for example, in Florida, and you have another house back home overseas. Okay, if that house is fully designated for your personal use, it's not for rent, it's not for sale, it is locked, closed throughout the whole year, designated exclusively for your personal use whenever you go, back home to spend a few days or a few weeks with your family, then that property is zakah exempt. Obviously, a Muslim is expected not to be extravagant, because extravagance in Islam is extremely prohibited. So you make sure that you have what you need, not you have based on what you can afford. So if you need a house, for example, that is 4 bedrooms, do not have a house that is 8 or 9 bedrooms. If you need 3 cars for your personal use and your family members, do not have 5 or 6. However, the extra, even for the extravagant people, the extra properties is zakah exempt. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. Back to the exceptions. Your transportation is zakah exempt. Even if you have a very luxurious, a very fancy car, as long as it's not for commercial purposes, then it is zakah exempt. Your residence, the house that you live in, is zakah exempt. What else? The clothes that you have, okay, in your closet is zakah exempt, even if you have way more than what you need. The food that you store at home, some people might prepare to store food or certain items of food for months, sometimes even for years. Okay. In some cultures, maybe back home, we store olives and olive oil for 1 or 2 years. And in some Gulf countries, they store maybe a date fruit or tamar for 2 or 3 years ahead of time. So whatever is saved for the personal use, for the family itself, there is no commercial purpose behind it, that is zakah exempt. Properties in public trust or owned publicly, like a masjid, for example, or an Islamic school or an Islamic organization. Okay, even if the masjid worth maybe millions of dollars, it's not zakatable, it's not subject to zakah, because it's not owned individually by certain individuals. Even hospitals and orphanages and nursing homes, as long as they are owned publicly by the state, by the county, by the government, they are zakah exempt. But if the hospital or the nursing home is owned privately by certain individuals, investors, doctors, will obviously, that is a zakatable one, because this is their business. They make a lot of money out of running the hospital or whatever the business might be. Another category that's called exploited assets. Exploited assets means al-mustaghallat. Mustaghallat is a kind of property that is the item itself or the property itself is not for sale, but you generate money out of it. You have a laboratory, for example. Okay, you make you provide like a medical service. You make some tests, okay, and you charge money. You pay zakah on the generated money. You have a taxi cab. The vehicle itself is not for sale, but you make money out of driving and just providing transportation services. So the money that is generated out of having that taxi cab is subject to zakah. You have a rental property. You have some maybe apartment complex or rental house, The house itself is not for sale, but you make money out of leasing that property. Then the money that you make is subject to zakat. When it comes to property in particular, make sure that you have the right intention from the beginning, because the intention actually is the main factor behind the zakatability status of that property. I'll give you an example. You have a house. As long as the house is for your personal use, regardless of the market value of the house, it is zakah exempt. After a while, you change your mind and you move to a different place, and that house that used to be occupied or utilized by you became for rent. From that time on, you calculate your zakah based on the rent money that you receive out of leasing that house. So if the house is stayed like unrented, unleased, okay, for years and years, you don't need to pay zakah because you are not generating money out of it. After a while, you change your mind and you put it in the market for sale this time, not for lease anymore. And from that time on, from the time in which you put it in the market, it's now actively in the market for sale, then you pay zakah on the market value of the house and not on the rental money anymore. So you can easily see that the intention and the practice together determine the zakatability status of the property that you have. Another thing, when it comes to property, sometimes you choose to buy a piece of land for a long-term investment. You buy it for now, okay, almost for free, and it's very, very cheap. And your plan is just to sleep on it for maybe 10, 15, 20 years until the price goes up, and then you put it in the market. Now, what is the status of that land zakah-wise? Imam Malik rahimahullah in his school of thought differentiates between what is called التاجر المحتكر والتاجر المدير. التاجر المدير is the active merchant. Active merchant means everything he or she buys is for sale by default. He is very active in the market. He buys and he sells immediately. There is nothing called on hold. So التاجر المدير, everything that he has, or the active merchant, everything he has, as long as it is a commodity or merchandise, okay, or goods, something for sale, then it is zakatable regardless. But the other one is التاجر المحتكر. التاجر المحتكر actually is the inactive merchant, is the one who has a long-term plan for the property that he has. So you buy a house for maybe $100,000, but it's not for sale to start with. Your intention, your plan is just to sleep on it for 5, 7, 10 years, and then way later on, you will put it in the market whenever the price goes up. If that is the intention, then according to this school of thought, you don't need to pay zakah on it, because simply it's not for sale for the time being. So make sure that you set the right intention from the beginning. And once you change your intention, the zakatability of your wealth will be changed accordingly. Merchants, business people, and the zakat due date, say for example that you have a car dealership business or a grocery store. Let's go with car dealership. How to determine the value of the assets that you have in the zakat due date? How to determine the value? How to determine the value of the assets that you have in the zakat due date, so you can calculate your zakah accordingly. You can go with what is called the invoice value, how much you paid to buy all these cars that you have in your lot in the zakat due date. And this is actually not a fair and just option, because the market value might be the same, might be more, or might be less, especially when it comes to food or candy, for example. It might happen sometimes that you buy a candy for $20,000, $30,000 for some reason in the zakat due date. All the candy that you have are expired. Expired means that the market value of the candy is $0. Although you paid from your own pocket $30,000, but its market value is 0. Now, should you pay zakah on $30,000 that nowadays in the zakah due date worth $0? Obviously no. So do not go with the what is called the invoice value, because invoice value might reflect the actual value in the zakah due date and might not. The market value could be way more, could be way less, it could be the same. Now the other option that some people go with is called the retail value. Retail value means how much you are asking for in the zakah due date. Okay, if the invoice value is 70,000, then the retail value should be around 100,000. Is that correct? So should you pay zakah on 100,000? No, because the retail value is just a potential one. You did not sell what you have yet. You might get 100,000, you might get more, you might get less. So it's not fair to go with the retail value. So how to determine the value? You go with something that's called the wholesale market value. Wholesale market value means simply that in the zakah due date, if you do not have all these cars that you have in your lot, how much you are willing to pay, to the auction or to the wholesaler to buy all these cars. If you do not have all what you have, how much you are willing to pay at that day wholesale to buy all the stuff or all the cars that you have. If you do not have any grocery items in your grocery store, in the zakah due date, how much you are willing to pay to buy all the stuff or the groceries that you have. That is exactly the wholesale market value, and this is actually the way that is I would say most accurate way of calculating your zakah. For business people, there is something called receivables and something else called payables, right? Receivables are the amounts of money that you expect to receive from other people, from individuals, from clients, from customers, even from other merchants. Should you take into consideration the receivables or not? Do not consider the receivables whatsoever. Do not worry about the money that other people owe you. Just wait until you actually receive the money and then you pay zakah on it. Do not worry about it. If the receivable is not counted for this year toward your zakah, next year it will not be receivable anymore. It will be received already. So wait until you receive it. And then you pay zakah on it. When it comes to payables are two kinds. They could be due payables, something that is due immediately in the zakah due date, and they could be something deferred to the future. Okay, if the payable is due immediately, if the payables are due immediately, I mean that you need to pay off in the zakah due date, then you can put them aside. You can just deduct everything. But if they are not due, then you should not. Just keep them in the virtual pool of money and do not consider them. Okay, if you pay zakah on them for this year because you did not deduct them, for next year you will not pay zakah on them anymore because they will be already paid to their like legitimate owners. So do not consider the receivables and do not consider the payables when it comes to your zakah. A part of this is to take into consideration your tax money. Well, first of all, paying tax is not sufficient from paying Zakat al Maal. So do not get confused. You pay your tax money to the IRS, to the government, because you live in the US here. Whether you are legal alien or you are American citizen or permanent resident, you pay your tax money because you live in this society, regardless of your deen, whether you are Christian or Muslim or atheist, it doesn't make any difference. While you pay Zakat al Maal because you are a Muslim. So those are two different financial responsibilities: governmental one versus a religious or Islamic one. There is no substitute for Zakat al Maal. Paying your tax is not sufficient. You have to pay your zakah as well. Is it true that your zakah is tax deductible? Your zakah is tax deductible? Yes. If you choose to pay your zakah to a 501c3 non-for-profit organization, that would be a tax deductible. It will be a tax deductible. Is it true that your tax money is zakat deductible? Yes, it is. Okay, only and only in one case. If you owe the IRS, okay, and the zakat due date, say in the beginning of Ramadan, you owe the government or the IRS or Uncle Sam as they call it. If you owe the IRS certain amount of money that is due immediately, then you can deduct it. You can deduct it from the virtual pool of money or from the zakatable money that you have. From the zakatable money that you have. You have $25,000 net amount after deducting everything, but you still owe the government, the IRS, another $5,000. Should you consider paying Zakat al Maal on $25,000 or only $20,000? You pay your zakah based on $20,000 only, while you have to make sure, by the way, that you pay already. I mean, it's not a theoretical calculation. No, you take off the $5,000 and you pay it immediately to the IRS. This is what does it mean that your zakah is tax deductible and your tax is zakah deductible. Another thing, any amount of money that has been generated in a haram way. Someone invested money, someone mistakenly, knowingly or unknowingly invested some money in interest. He or she has bonds, received some interest money, or have a saving account. Whatever you generate as an interest, as a haram money, whatever you generate as a haram money is not zakatable. You have to get rid of all the haram money in full. Inna Allah Ta'ala طيب لا يقبل إلا طيبا. You pay your zakat al mal on the pure halal money, not on the haram money. Allah forbids if a certain amount of money has been taken like through bribery or extortion, or has been stolen or taken in any like illegitimate way, then that certain amount of money has to be paid in full, has to be given back to its legitimate owner. It's not subject to zakah. One of the main differences between calculating your zakah and your taxes is that when it comes to tax, what time is the salah, Sheikh?
10:05.
Meta salah?
10:05.
We still have some time?
We have to do it. 4 minutes.
But whenever the time is due, just let me know.
Of the
Is it? Yeah. Or the adhan time.
4 minutes.
طيب. One more point. When it comes to calculating your tax, usually you go with the total income. Is that correct? How much you already made in 2014, you just report to the IRS. Obviously, everything will be taken into consideration, like the number of households and other deductions and other expenses. Everything is counted. But to start the calculation with, you go with the total income. When it comes to Zakat al Maal, we do not care about the total income. We care about the remaining income. So in our example, if you made 100,000 in 2014 and the remaining income in the zakat due date in the beginning of Ramadan is only 20,000, then you start your calculation, you start your math based on 20,000. Whatever generated and spent, do not worry about it. It's not to be taken into consideration. So it is true that zakah should be calculated based on the remaining income and assets as well. Assets are to be taken into consideration. One more thing, what if you have a certain amount of money that you paid zakah on it for this year, and for some reason you did not invest it, you did not spend it, it's still under your possession, and one complete hawl, like fiscal lunar year, already passed, and you still have the exact amount of money for the next year. Do you have to pay zakah on it one more time? Absolutely yes. You have to pay zakah on it over and over. That's why it's highly recommended even by the Prophet ﷺ to invest your money, otherwise it will be devoured, it will be eaten, consumed by the zakah money. Imagine that you have $100,000 and you choose to sleep on the money. Definitely the market value of the money will be reduced because of the inflation, number one. And number two, it will be consumed by the zakah, 2.5% for the next 40 years, the whole amount will be gone. That's why the Prophet ﷺ highly recommended the wealth managers of the orphans, okay? Those who take care of the wealthy orphans by saying, اتجروا في مال اليتيم حتى لا تأكله الصدقة. So a صدقة actually will be eaten, will be consuming or devouring the zakah money. I will stop by this point, inshallah. After the fourth rak'ah, I'll be introducing to you all Huda University maybe for 3-4 minutes and asking for your support, for your financial support. And by the way, Huda University is an eligible Zakat recipient, so we can pay your Zakat to support Huda University. For those who have questions or concern about Zakat, I'll be inshallah more than happy after we finish with the Mashayikh, Salat al-Isha and Salat al-Tarawih. I will stay here inshallah to take your questions. If I have knowledge, inshallah, I will be more than happy to answer your questions, how to calculate your Zakat accordingly. Sorry for running out of time. We cannot take any question now, inshallah. All the questions, inshallah, will be answered after Salat al-Isha, al-Tarawih, and Salat al-Witr. جزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله على محمد.